Hi everyone, welcome. We're over here at my computer, and, well, more specifically, we're in my tracking spreadsheet. I wanted to just show you really quick what we're going to be taking care of today before we head on down to my wormery. It's my oldest bin here, my 182 system that's got the red wigglers, European night crawlers, and the Indian blue worms. I do have a sense that the system is mainly blue worms. And today is the 15th day that the bin has been doing what I refer to as migrating. And migrating is really just trying to lure the worms into a particular portion of the bin. Every time I'm doing this in one of my systems, I keep reflecting on how am I going to do relative to my best time ever migrating, which was 18 days. And I do believe today we're going to be beating that and creating a new record here for migrating the worms out of one of my active worm bins. Now, I do believe after 15 days we can say for certain that we can bring an end to this migration because, you know why? Because 8 days ago when we were in here last, where we added a little bit of food to the migration area, we even questioned whether it was necessary because even then it looked like, after only 1 week of starting the horizontal migration of the worms, it had already looked like they had already left the finished castings. So even then it seems like we could have potentially brought this process to a close, but at this point we're going to do it today on the 182nd day of the system being in service, and hopefully they enjoy their new home. So let's head on down there now and get them relocated. Oh yeah, the other weird thing about breaking the record today on the 10th of November is that if you go to when this system had broken the record after an 18-day migration, you would have to go back a little bit on the calendar to get to the day that that system was harvested. But there too, 1 year ago today, it was on the 10th of November. Just kind of another weird correlation that was completely unplanned. But I just thought I would share. All right, let's head downstairs and get this done. So down here in the wormery, it's this system up here. It's the one that we're going to be depopulating today and bringing the worms over down into their new home. The pre-built VermiBag Tote sitting inside this plastic bus box. So I put on a glove and we'll get to work. This plastic box always comes in really handy for hauling stuff like this. It's about the right size, I think. Yeah, I think we'll do good. I was just wondering if we're going to overflow the thing by pretty much excavating the entire feeding zone out of this box and just dumping it in here. I think we'll be okay. It's a pretty good size plastic box. I always do find a few worms hanging out on this plastic cover when I come in here. The plastic is where all the vaporized moisture from beneath it is trapped and oh, let's get this little guy back in here too. So yeah, all the dampness that would otherwise just evaporate away gets caught on the plastic, and that's a place that the worms just can't resist going. All right, I got another one over here. Let's try to stay in the bin, guys. At this point, I gotta trust that the plastic has been evacuated because we're pretty much dismantling this system now. Although the plastic will probably, come back into play because I'll usually not want to allow my finished castings to continue drying once my migration is completed. So I'll cover these castings up with plastic now so that they stay nice and damp the way you want your castings to be. It's just that during this migration stage I do try to let the stuff get a little bit drier than normal as motivation to get the worms to come over to where it's nice and damp. So let's just bring back one of these sheets of paper so we can rest our little collection box on it. And then we can start pulling everything out of here. Try to do it in an orderly fashion. This coffee filter was just sort of hanging out on top, just creating a little bit of an extra layer of covering and maybe even a little additional barrier to keep the moisture down in here rather than let it evaporate and escape. So I'm wondering how many handfuls it'll take to excavate this feeding zone. We'll see if we can turn it upside down, because I would think that the bottom side of it is where we're going to see a little bit more worm traffic. Good number of worms hanging out in that handful. I was able to feel the entire package in my hand sort of squirming around, which was pretty interesting. Get another nice big handful. I just don't want to bite off more than I could chew and then have the whole handful sort of crumble and fly all over the place. Make a mess. Leave a bunch of poor little worms stranded all over the place. So those two nice big handfuls. I think we're probably a little more than halfway through. And we're still doing pretty good in this box as far as space is concerned. Yeah, I think we could do it in maybe one more handful. Here too, I could feel the contents of what's in my hand moving, pulsing. Which was so strange. Alright. Let's get the last of these little guys out of here. Try to minimize their stress from me coming in here and bothering them. This was the corner. Sometimes the corner you get a good worm turnout for some reason. Okay. But, you know, if I can sort of just look down and see more worms, I should really snatch them up versus permitting them to squirm back into their old finished castings. In a way, you would want to think that these finished castings are good to go, ready to be utilized out in the garden, and they would be. But then it's just all that future worm activity that comes from all of the cocoons in the material hatching and producing baby worms. And we got a good number of worms hanging out over here on the cardboard barrier and right on the perimeter. Maybe I should just sort of crumble apart about an inch worth of material and see if I can try to retrieve the worms from this stuff, or maybe even just bring the stuff over with them. Beautiful castings, but if we let it accompany these worms over into their new space, I don't see a problem with that. I just sort of keep skimming a little bit more, because each time I look in there I could see more worms hanging out on the perimeter. But not that many at this point, one or two. So what do we do? Do we just take all those castings along for the ride? Guess we could. It seems like a bit much. I don't know. I'd hoped for more of like a nice dense ball of worms, not a whole bunch of other stuff to clutter up my view of how many worms we've got in here. Yeah, you know, I think if we put it in here, shine the light, after a few minutes we should be able to skim off a good portion of it and leave it behind as castings, and at that point the worms will have just squirmed down through the stuff, down into all that stuff over there, all those larger chunks of paper and everything. So we'll do what we can to leave a lot of these really nice finished castings behind, because all we're really interested in is getting these last few handfuls of worms to stay with the rest of the gang. Yeah, we got a good number of them in here. I'm going to be keeping these nice bright lights on right overhead. Hopefully they'll do what they always do, which is dive down out of the light. Then we can start picking off some of these nice castings and just dropping them back into this box of finished castings. It's not so important to be 100%, you know. If there's still some worms hanging out in here, the reason we're going to continue with this finished material here in the form of a cocoon nursery is because there's going to be a whole bunch of baby worms emerging in a little while. And if there's a few adult worms there to greet those babies once they start arriving, then there's no harm in that. We'll just fish out the adults with the babies when the time comes to depopulate the finished castings. So let's let these guys sit a little bit out here in the bright light, squirm out of the castings, and then we'll do a little skim. Well, I stepped away for just about a minute or two, and I don't see any more signs of activity here on the surface. So maybe we can just do a quick skim off the top. There's nothing in these castings. These little guys all went ahead and went down below to get away from me. And once I start seeing a few more of them here, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can see a few more of them. Maybe we'll give this this trick here a couple more retries. Kind of jiggle up the top surface of the material, get them sort of in a flee mode a little bit, like they want to get away from the big scary monster picking around in their dirt. And we could skim away their beautiful castings. I can still see one little guy over here. Not feeling like he wants to dive down. So why don't we skim off the castings that are near him. Let's not release his friends though. Let's keep everyone together. Actually, we'll go as deep as we can over here. Retrieve all these castings. We'll throw our little worm friends down into that little hole we created. That should allow us to skim off about the same amount from everywhere else. But I'm already bumping into a number of worms here and there. Let's just make sure we bring back everyone who we accidentally took along for a ride there. So this system, like I said earlier, is going to be cocoon nursery. If you were to pick through this thing carefully, you would probably find tons and tons of cocoons all over the place. And the moisture level is so nice in here, I gotta say. We have been gradually allowing it to dry, keeping minimal coverings in places, like these pieces of paper. Not offering a lot of protection to inhibit evaporation. But at this point we're going to turn to the plastic again to bring back full, or a high degree of moisture retention capability. Not let this stuff dry any further. In fact, it might not even hurt to come back in here at some point later to even dampen it up, since the next thing that we want to see happen in here is a bunch of cocoons hatching and babies showing up, and they'll need moisture. So let's head on over to this container. As we all know, this is just a temporary container until the worms can be released into their new home, the VermiBag Tote. So it's zipped up here. Let's get it open so we can have ourselves a little worm release. Get these little guys situated in their new home. The plastic is here to perform the same function that it's serving in the other container, is to hold moisture down within the system rather than allowing it to evaporate. And this was sort of just showing where I had placed the food when I was in here last time. I don't even remember what kind of food it was, but it was just a variety of different things. So why don't we bring the camera in just a little bit closer. Because then this way we'll get a much better view of our worm release, which is really nothing more than me dumping this container out. So these pieces of cardboard that served the function of partition previously will be a nice little haven for the worms to hang out in. You can see they really enjoy getting down in between the layers of this stuff. In certain places there's always a bunch of them. Sometimes maybe here it's too dry in that corner. Can't even peel it apart. But I think it's time to introduce these little guys to their home, their new home. So let's get this show on the road. We did bring over this additional coffee filter from the other container. Let me just make sure I don't have anyone that's stuck in the plastic. Okay, we got them all. Good. And I put these pieces of cardboard here. I don't want to have that because I want them to be able to pretty freely get down out of the bright lights, dive down as deep as they want, ideally down into the material of the bin right below them. Ooh, got a whole bunch here. So unfortunately we don't have a very good view of them all, but they're in here. They're in here in great numbers. And these are pretty quick worms to retreat down out of the light. So why don't I just give them a chance to do that, and then we'll be finished here. Well, I stepped away for just long enough to rinse off our little box here. And as far as I could see, there's no worms out here. I mean, if I was standing here the whole time watching, I'd probably know where they are. But just at first sight, I don't see any movement and I don't see any worms. So, why don't we proceed with putting this system away, letting these little guys get used to their new home. Hopefully they like it. This system's been sitting here for a while now, kind of stewing, sort of melding together into a nice, comfortable place for the worms. All kinds of damp bedding. I've been repeatedly coming in here over the past few days just to make sure dampness and moisture levels are nice and high and comfortable, so that when the worms finally get in here, they like their new home. There's a lot of bedding in here. I mean, the system is, you know, all brand new fresh bedding. Almost no new food. I put in a little bit of food right down the middle. Normally we would use one of these to indicate where the feeding was by covering it over. But I think we'll be able to remember that the feeding was down the middle. It's where I feed all the time, so it's not too much of a mystery. So, I think there's one more thing to do. Please join me in welcoming the newest system in my wormery. It's my mixed population operating here within my VermiBag Tote, running inside of a bus box. So I think once the sticker's on the container, it makes it official. Alright, I've got a label for the box. That's going to be the cocoon nursery as well. I'll just figure out where that stuff's going to be. It might not remain in the box that it's in right now. So that's it, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching.